You're on, and we have many people in the meeting now.
Okay, welcome back, everyone, to the July 6th. Maybe at the end. Yeah, we can ask at the end. Welcome back, everyone. We are resuming with PB 2403 27-29 Main Street.
So, since I was here last. We, as the board asked, we had showing the gravel walkway. There was three things you guys asked me to do.
Yeah,
Well, since you brought up the gravel drive, it's a walkway, right?
Walkways, yeah, sorry.
I'm not sure that's ADA compliant.
Well,
And I think you have an ADC parking space right next to it.
yeah, but I think if any of the units would be ADA required, I can make it the first one, so it could be a little gravel area, a little sidewalk area for the first unit.
mhm.
So the question is, are you going to have an ADA unit?
I don't know if I'm required by law. If I'm required by law, yes.
So we would need to know that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean. And as they said to the last applicant, gravel tends to move around. Yeah, it's gonna go somewhere. It's gonna get plowed in the winter, it's gonna get shoveled in the winter, it's gonna get. For sure.
The apartment count is 4 units. We're required to have 2 more parking spaces, so we added that. Out of the spaces we had, so now we're down to 7 access spaces. We're removing the lot line. From this area, showing the property line, so there's no more lot line here. The walkway. The DOT has all this information, spoke to them. They are reviewing it. That's all he said. He said, but there's really, this is not my driveway, so this, they don't think they're gonna comment on. And inside of the curb is the right of way, so I'm not encroaching into their right of way, so I may not even require a permit, is what they told me.
So where did you add the 2 additional parking spaces?
Well,
Across the
Straight
street?
across the street.
So that's why there's no more green space across the street.
Well, you said you had no interest in the green space across the
No, we
street.
didn't. We said that it wasn't an adequate substitute for destroying the green space on the eastern side of the building. Of course, there should be green space across the street.
Well, at this
And
point,
there are trees there now, but,
there are
just
people,
saying you're gonna remove it because we don't care about it, that isn't fair.
okay, well, look. We have 7 spaces that we don't. Okay, but I also have a basement space that I do not have a tenant for. I have really not marketed or even tried
The basement of the bank,
of the bank. If someone does want to come along and use a back office space or something, or any other permitted use, I would need those 7 spaces. So we just have to be aware of. For the code. And
So if you got an additional tenant, that would require another special use permit, you'd have to come back before the board.
well, if it's.
Well, the
has a right-
consideration for wanting that additional possibility of that tenant to be included in this application, that would mean the additional possibility of the square footage of that tenant would have to be in your application.
No, the simple fact of the matter is. If it was a zone permitted use, and I needed parking,
Yeah. Then you have to include that parking requirement.
but I
in
don't
the-
know what the tenant is.
But the
That's what I'm
planning
saying, I
board
can't-
doesn't work where you say things like, if I needed it, then I would want to use those 7 spots. That's not the way it works. If you want the approval for those 7 spots and that thousands of square feet of professional office space you just referred to, then that has to be included in your application. If you wanna, well, there's no other if. That's the way it works.
But what I'm saying is, so that no building can ever be built unless you know what every tenant is.
No,
Well, you were.
Not
you haven't even included the possibility of it. It says, doesn't
A
matter
lot
if
of
you-
our applicants, what they'll do is they'll make like kind of a blank envelope, and that way they could have a tenant in the future, but we don't really know what kind of a tenant. That's how they present it to us.
Well,
And I may be wrong, excuse me, I may be wrong. But I distinctly recall. You appeared before us and said you had no plans to use the basement space.
I don't. At this time, I do not.
But you
You
just
never
brought it
said
up as
that.
though you wanted the.
just brought it up.
No, but what I'm saying is,
Okay, well then put it on the plan.
what do you want me to put on the plan?
Anybody, can you really?
35
I'm not arguing.
3,500 square feet of potential lawful users?
Can we start over and do an application review, in today's meeting? Because there are a lot of things still to talk about here, and we seem to be going backwards with some of the wishes that we've expressed to the applicant. So.
Yeah.
May I?
Yes, please, go
Thanks.
ahead.
So I did a site visit with Mike this week because I really wanted to make sure I understood the layout of the application as a site plan as it's proposed and how that sits within the entire property that really has to be considered in order for us to understand what's happening on the site. And so one of the things that is true of your plan, and maybe you can put that here, if you don't mind.
I have another copy if the board would like to.
So one of the things that's true of the plan is that the post office building ends here.
Yeah.
And this is that parking that's used for the businesses that exist over here.
Yeah.
And there's cars that flow from that parking pretty regularly because it's a post office and a laundromat and a restaurant. So there's a pretty regular flow of cars from over here, either because they were in this parking and they left, or because sometimes they just come around and drop their mail off in the mailbox and leave. And so there's currently no consideration of how the traffic that uses this lot integrates and may conflict with what you've proposed here. So I believe we need to take some account into the traffic flow that happens here and how it ends up used, because it uses both your driveways to leave or enter.
I don't have one driveway. This is my driveway.
Okay, so it uses that. It's often the case, someone might come to you here and then come through your space to do it. Matter of fact, I did it the other day with Mike. So we have to take into account what's happening over here in the context of your site plan. And today, and right now, it's as though there's no activity here.
Right.
The other piece of activity that I was describing the last time we met was what happens here at the mobile and how people come and go and use your property to come and go from there.
They avoid the light that way.
And as I understand it, this crosshatch has something to do with that, which I'd like you to explain.
The traffic's also on this.
So a question I have is, one is, how will your plan account for the fact that there's traffic coming from here using your property to exit and here, which I understand is now being, is going to be addressed here, and I will give you the opportunity to explain that, please. With that question, are these spots additional to what's already here?
No, they're there.
So do you remember there being parking spots that extend beyond the,
There's a little walkway here.
Are you talking,
beyond the
Next
edge
to the
of the
green
post
space?
office? No, where the loading dock is for the post office, because that's the other thing that's not clear.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
This is a loading dock.
those parking spaces are there.
So they're here and and this here is a loading dock. So, which is another thing that isn't considered in the context of how cars come and go. The fact that trucks come, I don't know how frequently, and use this loading dock. And so these parking spots are already here because they go to that to that extension of the loading dock. Because this
Right.
drops down here. So how these things all work together, this is an opportunity to improve this. And right now, we're not even considering the fact that traffic flows from both of these other locations through your place. And I would want the board to consider that. And I'd like your site plan to consider that.
So I just have one question. So I called the police department after we got over last year. There's never been an incident in the last 5 years. And none year to date. What is the board's concern about is it accidents? What exactly is the concern that we're raising? Because when the Wells Fargo was operating, everybody was operating, that cross easement's been there for about 7 years, according to the owner of the mobile station, at least, or maybe even longer. And there's never been an incident in the parking lot. So what exactly is the board's concern? Because we have the two traffic consultants on the line, and I'd like to have them properly addressed. Because it's not accidents, because they're not having.
Yeah.
What is the concern?
The concern is that you're proposing a significant change in where parking exists on your site plan,
Well, no,
which is this additional amount of parking.
6 spaces.
And this additional amount of parking is not only something that now has to be considered in terms of where cars come and go, but that we've adamantly opposed because it's not consistent with the gateway zoning and the intentions of how lots are used in this district.
But for the purpose of the traffic.
So the purposes of traffic, we want to know how traffic is going to work because you're proposing something new. And the thing you're proposing that's new is something that I think all of us are not agreeing to
But that's
because it's not
separate.
consistent with the
That's
code.
separate and apart from the traffic. So let's satisfy the traffic.
But I'm not willing to speak, no.
I think they're directly
It's,
linked.
first of all, you need a site plan that incorporates the considerations I'm asking for. And because you want us to vote on whether you want to add these, then the impact of these has to be taken into account in terms of how people come and go.
Okay,
And then we'll just vote on these.
that's fine.
And we can do a straw poll on that sooner than later.
Well, we don't need to do that. We're gonna go through the process.
If I can continue, at our site visit, we saw that you could accomplish the goal you have for having a handicap parking spot if you simply leave parking that already exists here alongside of the green space, which would be to the north of the green space, as opposed to adding the spots here and eliminating the green space. And a handicap parking spot here or here would be almost the identical distance from the front door of your space and accomplish exactly what you've indicated is important to you. You could even have 1, 2, 3, even 4 here, which already exists. People already park there. And so there's both no commercial rationale for this to take place. It's not consistent with our code. And it creates a new traffic consideration that we're asking you to consider. Because now you're indicating that this is all going to happen in and out of here. And so you can decide whether you want to continue with this as part of your application. But what I'm explaining is that, one, it can be accomplished in some way very differently that would actually be within the zoning, the gateway zoning rules. And that if you don't do this, it doesn't create as many new traffic considerations.
Well, let's just focus on the traffic, because public safety is very important to me as an issue. If we can establish that the safety concerns and the traffic concerns, then we're only down to the issue of where you'd like to park.
Okay, so then to address the traffic concern, I'd like you to incorporate what remains, what is on these adjacent elements of this lot. In order
Mind
to,
if I add something?
yeah, but then to address the traffic concern of this new proposed configuration that you want to have, which we've indicated is not consistent with the code.
Okay.
We want to see how the traffic that comes in and out of this neighboring lot is going to affect the addition of these spots and how this is going to affect.
Now, you do know that I don't own any of those parcels.
Yes, I
have
know
no
that.
control.
I know that, but we often assess the impact of an adjacent property on a property, especially when it's really evident that the impact of that adjacent property is that they use your property to come and go.
But we can correct that. We can say no through traffic. We can sign it so that no other people could cross over into my lot. They would travel through the post office like they have been now, but enter our parking and be signed and
So
directed.
then
and
let's have a site plan that tells us that that's the solution to this, that you're gonna eliminate any traffic consideration by virtue of having signage that prevents people from entering your lane.
Well, let's talk to the traffic consultants, because let's see what if they can establish a proper study, to satisfy the board's concerns, and if that becomes signage, do not enter, no through traffic, and then everybody will enter the post office, enter. Now they could go to our businesses, but they can't travel from the post office or the others through.
And in which case, and I would like to ask the traffic consultants, have you done a site visit to this lot?
Are you asking me as the village's traffic consultant or the applicant's traffic consultant?
Yeah, John, I don't know if I don't see your.
Sorry, Carlito.
What's that?
I thought his traffic consultants were available. I wasn't asking you.
Yeah, I think his traffic consultant's on.
Curious to know whether you visited the lot too.
I have visited the lot, yeah.
Which one is he? Which guest?
Which name is he? Because I don't.
Start there.
I think he's the 910 number.
Oh, is he just on his phone?
Muted.
He's muted.
Ask to unmute.
Yeah, he's gonna have to unmute, so I can't.
Yeah, you can ask to unmute.
Yeah, I have.
Oh,
Let's see.
We could call
One thing in observing this with Rich that I think would help in the discussion is if, and I know it's the neighboring site, but just like you would normally sometimes show a building on a neighboring site, if you could show the additional or some of the parking spaces on the other property, that will reflect better on the site plan where the driving aisles are. And I think that will go a long way to try, because right now it's just a white void over there. Other than the little bit of the retaining wall for the post office and a few feet of the post office building. And then looking at that plan, when Rich and I stood there, if parking spots were located on your site plan, that would really, in my opinion, would help the discussion considerably as to the impact of the traffic, because then you would see where the aisles are. So I don't know if that's possible.
I see some notice that the phone number is talking, yeah, but I don't hear
Yeah.
anything. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I was
Yes.
waiting. I was letting the gentleman finish speaking. I didn't want to interrupt. This is Star Tip with Creighton Manning Engineering. I'm assuming you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I don't know who asked the question, but I have visited the site. It actually wasn't in relation to this project. It was in regards to another project back in March of this year. So, but I am familiar with the location. When it comes to studying the site, you know, typically with internal lots like this, internal circulation like this, the main concern would be, you know, safety. And based on the collision records provided by the police department, there's been no history of collisions at this internal intersection. So the next question I have would be, from a study standpoint, as I recall from my site visits, albeit it was during more of a lunchtime period, I think I was there around like 12 or 1 o'clock at that time. I didn't see any operational constraints. That would be the other thing that we would study. Like, is there just a backup through this whole site? Is the parking lot just locked up? And I don't recall seeing anything like that. And so that would be my next question. If we think there's a concern there operationally, I think as what's been discussed is the hatching at that intersection. I think that was to address concerns from the previous meeting, which I did not attend, but I did review the video on YouTube, and it sounded like there was concern about kind of uncontrolled movements, people not yielding to each other, making left turns into the site, And I think one thing we have to remember is that this is a parking lot. People go 10, 15 miles an hour. Hopefully they're going much less. And it's going to continue to operate the way it is. It's not like we're drastically changing what is still essentially a four-way internal intersection here. So while I understand that there needs to be a study done here, there's a desire to have a study done here, I'm a little unclear as to what would be studied at this point, given that what's being proposed is a low volume trip generator. And what is there is existing, like the cross access that's there is existing. And there's no real history of collisions that would be a point of concern or a reason to apply mitigation more so than what is currently being proposed here with this site plan. Yeah, I will say we've talked about, or I think in the last meeting, there was discussion about what the state might think about this. And while I don't think this is in the purview of the state, the internal intersection cross access is looked upon as favorable by the state in almost all circumstances. So cross access is a point of desire with site plans typically, which is what we have here. So I'll just end it at that. And obviously, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think I jumped in at the parking portion we were talking about. I don't know if there's any questions before that, but I'm here now.
So what does the cross hatching on this new site plan represent?
So the cross hatching is similar to what would be, I'll admit, there's not really great standard guidance on how to hatch an internal intersection, right? That's kind of an industry standard. You might see it now where a lot of people are doing kind of a street art. The end goal is to indicate to drivers that there is essentially an intersection here. Draw their attention to the fact that you should not just be zipping through the parking lot. So the cross hatching is similar to what you might see for like a do not block the box on a roadway, right? It's meant to catch the driver's eyes. We would, at the end of we would love to put signs in here, but if you've been to the site, which I know you guys have, you know that it's basically a kind of an asphalt field where there's not a good location to put signage. So what we've done in the past, I recently did a project in Pelham that was a parking lot, and we did all of the kind of regulatory signage by way of striping because there was no good locations to put signage in, except for like one corner where there was a building we could use. But in this case, there's no such resource.
So is there a way to use cross-hatching and striping to address the idea that that there is also traffic flow in and out of the applicant's site plan from the north end where there is other parking and commercial uses, as well as the east end where you've seems to have used cross-hatching to address that intersection? This is technically this is a 4-part intersection. So
Well,
is that same,
I
can
would
that
say-
same thing be accomplished?
This parking makes it a 5-way intersection because then you have cars.
It's basically a free-for-all. It's
Yeah.
basically cars coming from here, and then from the proposed.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 4-way. I think it's more
But to
complicated.
say,
So,
respectfully, though, to say it's a free-for-all, again, this is a parking lot. This is not an intersection
Alright,
where people are
setting
going
aside the
25,
term, it's
30
a-
miles per hour.
setting aside the term, it's a location where there are cars coming from multiple directions that you've indicated can be improved by, with cross-hatching and striping. So is there a way that you could present, working with your engineer or your architect, the cross-hatching and striping that would address all of the integration of the lot? that
Let's
we're
hear
asking about?
from your traffic engineer and what he suggests, because I'll do whatever you want. But
And then alongside that, I'd like to hear from both of the engineers, if you were to advise your client on adhering to the code of the village, would you be advising to propose parking that is inconsistent with the gateway guidelines for this area?
Well, it's
But
not
is the
traffic.
parking not in compliance with the code when it comes to the density and the use of the building?
It's in excess of the requirements of the code for the density and the use, and the excess comes from the proposed new spots.
Well, let's stick to
So-
traffic, because I think your attorney can talk about
So-
land use. I want to talk about traffic and safety. Let's establish traffic, safety and movements. That's what I think we should do, and the attorney can talk about land use. Let's just.
So if I can offer up some comments or opinions. It sounds like one of the concerns is the introduction of the new parking area in the green space. And that adding to more essentially conflict points at that confluence where you have traffic coming across from the other property, traffic coming in from the driveway, and traffic, you know, potentially coming from the commercial uses on the northern portion of this property. And since the parking is compliant by more than 7 spaces, and the parking that's in that parking area is only 6 spaces, would it make sense to land bank that parking for a future date if and when it was needed, if there was another use proposed in the basement area, to, you know, not have it be needed? And then even if you had a use at a later date, you could actually do a parking survey to say, you know, we surveyed the bank and the fitness center and the other uses, and during the peak times, it may still be short of the actual parking demand needed, and you may never need those spaces.
Go back to what I was saying. Let's talk about the safety and the movements. Land banking is really up to the attorney. So let's just.
No, it's up to the village planning board. We're the people who decide
I
that.
understand. So, but right now, we're really talking about internal circulation and safety. So let's just stay on it.
But the internal circulation and safety that we're describing, as Carlito just indicated, is brought on as a new concern by those parking spots that you're proposing that are not consistent with the gateway guidelines for this area.
But let's.
So it's not, if you think maybe we might forget about those parking
Oh,
spots and say, oh, the traffic's all figured out, let's do this, it's not going to happen.
You can, at the
So-
end, it's your decision to vote to
Okay.
approve or deny.
So then I'm asking the question of start, if I may, how will hashtagging and striping address the considerations we have for traffic flow in this lot?
Is your concern about traffic flow in the lot about the cross access between uses? I guess,
Just like you
'Cause that's what it
proposed
seems to be.
cross-hatching, just like you proposed cross-hatching to address the fact that there's traffic flowing from the mobile station use into the applicant's site. I'm also asking if there is a way to address through cross-hatching and striping, which is what you shared is the way to do this, from the north uses that occur that exist with the post office and the other commercial businesses to the north.
so the cross-hatching is located such that any of those vehicles coming from the commercial uses to the north, which includes the building that is the post office, would have to pass through that hatched area.
Okay, so there's no need for your professional recommendations, there's no need for any other striping or change, that this cross-hatching would address the traffic, the flow of traffic from all the points that intersect in this location.
That is my opinion, yes.
Okay. and
Between all the
Carlito,
3 uses,
Is your concern is more traffic coming that went to the commercial uses on the northern portion of the subject, well, using the parking on the northern portion of the subject property, then leaving, trying to go back out through, say, the gas station property. And
Yeah, I'm
just
just-
creating more conflicts at that location where they're coming in at that driveway. The, you know, the
Yeah,
other,
I'm asking-
another option to consider would be, to make the circulation on the site, one way in the counterclockwise direction. Because you have the western access. So any vehicles that came to the site through the eastern access and used whatever commercial facility or the bank or the health and fitness center can then exit out at the western access, and you limit the amount of potential conflicts at that kind of that confluence area.
That was something that came
Yeah.
up before.
It's a very good idea.
I would be in support of that, because I do think that's, it's going to get locked up, as they said, and maybe not cause an increase in accidents, although I could see that, but I do think it's going to get very congested.
I'll make it simpler.
And would that also come? Although your Stark has suggested that it's difficult to put signage here because there's no real place to put signage because it's open asphalt. But you had said that you would prohibit customers of the other businesses from coming through your site by virtue of signage.
Yeah, no through
And
access.
And so they would all
Go through
leave through,
traffic.
they would all then be directed to leave through this eastern egress.
Right, through the mobile gas station or out of the existing post office driveway.
Right, which would increase the number that would come through here if they're currently going that way. But one thing to note about this egress is that making left turns from this egress involves making a left turn across the what is often full 2 lanes that are heading east on 299. Mike, am I describing correctly? When you leave the eastern egress and you make a left turn, you're crossing the turn lane of 299. So it's, in other words, it's 3 lanes of traffic there, often full because they're waiting for the light.
You would
So
hope
I'm
that
not
you'd hope they'd be more logical to exit out onto North Chestnut to make the left at the signal. But
It would.
That's a really hard left to make. If you want to go through Mobile and make that left.
no, I'm saying, if they want to go east on Main Street,
Yeah,
instead of trying to make the left across the turn lane on 299, they make the right out of the Mobile property and make a left at the light to go east on Main Street.
Okay, well, I think, I mean, is the rest of the board in support of making traffic flow in the lot one way, so it directs most of the users of these businesses out the, what is that, the western?
Eastern.
Oh, eastern, yeah. No.
Kind of making this one way, so you
Yeah.
can exit here.
Yeah,
If you're in this lot, you exit here by
Yes,
one way direction.
right.
Okay, that's one question.
Yeah, I guess my question is, do we want to see that on the site plan? I think that's a good idea.
One
Along
way
with,
you could achieve that, over by the post office, there already are painted arrows on the asphalt to indicate a one-way direction. As was said before, it's gonna be very difficult to sign this one way, but certainly with a series of arrows pointed the direction to go out the access by the bank drive-through there. That would relieve that intersection of a percentage of the traffic, because they wouldn't be coming back out that way.
I want to jump in. I think I understand what sounds like a potential solution here that we can look at. With the counterclockwise circulation of our site, it sounded like there was another kind of concern raised, though, about vehicles exiting out of the eastern driveway from those other uses. And what I want to make sure is that we're not having this meeting just to make sure we have another meeting with comments to be addressed. So are we saying that with the counterclockwise circulation that we can do by striping with the arrows, as the gentleman was saying, I agree. Does that sound like the solution for addressing the traffic concerns here? The traffic concerns here.
I think that in conjunction with some, no through traffic signage.
And
Yeah, I
what's
think you might
the-
have to achieve it through, on pavement striping.
No, I agree with that. But that there was, there was a gentleman, forgive me again for not knowing who was saying it, but there was a gentleman saying about then vehicles will be forced to go and they'll have to make their left out of the eastern driveway, whereas they would have been taking out of the western driveway or something like that because we're not allowing through traffic.
That was in considering the combination of making it one way and prohibiting traffic from entering the site. Because if you prohibit
Right, so
traffic
are
from
we-
entering the site, then they have to leave the east driveway, and the east driveway is a pretty hard place to make a left from. So I'm kind of just responding to what's being presented, trying to make sure we're getting it right, because we might decide one thing improves one, and another thing makes another aspect more challenging.
So this is the east driveway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to steal from Peter to pay Paul, but I also want to make sure that we're finding a solution here now and not saying make it no throughs and one-way circulation just for us to come back and then say, well, you need to allow through traffic. Like, can we address that problem now? That we would rather have no through traffic and counterclockwise circulation than counterclockwise circulation and through traffic.
So there is one other thought I have about another possible solution, but it does involve site work on the neighboring property, which the applicant may or may not be able to achieve, so I don't know that you can require
I'd rather not
it. Okay,
even get
Okay.
into that.
because there is another, when Terry and I stood there was another thought that came in my mind, but it involves work on the other property, so.
Yeah,
In my opinion, I think ultimately, I think what the planning board wants to try and achieve is there's an opportunity here to make a pre-existing substandard condition better. May not be able to make it perfect, but if you can get the proposed project and an improved circulation pattern, that's the right opportunity. I think the counterclockwise circulation and the no through traffic striping is probably the best ultimate solution. Ultimately, I don't think many people are gonna travel around the bank and fitness center building to make the left onto 299 as opposed to trying to make what essentially is the more difficult left out of the eastern driveway. The last thing I would just mention, because, I think also, what's been observed is it's not just cross access from people going to the gas station or the post office, it's people coming down Chestnut Street, making a right, cutting through, and then making a right out of that western driveway. So you could look at having some law enforcement, because that is a citable action by avoiding a light.
right, okay, thank you.
I don't understand what the rationale is for not wanting to discuss preserving the section of green space that currently has 2 picnic tables on it and
Oh, I think we
That-
do want to discuss it, we just haven't gotten there yet, we're
Okay.
trying to finish the traffic stuff.
sure. Well,
So as far as the traffic is concerned, are we all in agreement that we'll make our property counterclockwise only, we will properly sign it. So that it shows, no through traffic, one-way traffic. Which will eliminate people cutting through. So that'll solve the concerns of the board. As it relates to circulation. If we had established that, that would be,
Yes, that,
I agree with that.
that's the solution I'm leaning
I'm
towards.
also fine with that.
okay, good.
Well, I'd say it's a couple of questions on the practicalities of this.
Sure.
First of all, how are you going to indicate to your customers that they need to do the counterclockwise? In other words, that they cannot exit the eastern driveway. But at the same time, not indicate this to the customers of the other side.
Well, there'll be a sign, there's enough room here, I think we're at this area. Put a sign that says, on one side, it'll be no through traffic, on the other side, it'll be do not enter.
No, I'm not talking, let's start with I'm talking about the counterclockwise circulation. How are you going to stop your folks from exiting this driveway,
This,
but not stop the guys, the people who are on the other side from exiting that driveway?
well, my thought was to put a sign, probably put a metal sign there that says, no through traffic facing the post office. And do not enter on our side.
I'm talking about the egress.
Yeah,
He's
look,
talking- Yeah,
if you're going this way, you can see the sign that said do not enter.
He's gonna put a sign here.
painting arrows on the asphalt.
Okay.
It will carry a lot.
Yeah, my other question is, you're gonna use cross hatching on a painted cross hatching.
Provided the neighbor will allow me to, that is not our property.
That's a should be, but that cross hatching is supposed to signal to people on the eastern side to not cross into your site.
Start,
It was originally intended, because my understanding from the reviewing the video last time is that there was concerns about people not being courteous or yielding drivers within the parking lot, and for them acknowledging that that was essentially an intersection. That was the point of that cross-hatching. It was not intended to prohibit drivers from any kind of maneuvers. It was meant more as a traffic calming measure.
A visual cue that people can drive over without interruption. So what, my question is, how that's going to work to prevent people from coming onto your site from the other side to exit the western parking.
I think the
I
cross.
think at this point, we would remove the cross hatching. At this point, we would get rid of the cross hatching, because clearly that's not the traffic calming is not the concern here. Now we're talking about prohibiting movements. And so we would likely look at other striping, which I think John was alluding to, where you have like a stop bar or something like that, or some kind of, regulatory white bar. And on one side you have do not enter, and on one side you have one way.
Okay,
And I'm also concerned about the issue of the separate ownership. I mean, these folks are gonna have to agree to traffic markings and directions that are going to impede their own customers' ability to egress.
well, as long, I can only speak from what I can do on my property, I'm willing to do whatever concerns the village has. As it relates to neighboring property, I can request, they're friends of mine as well, so I can request that they do this, but I can't enforce them to do this. And we run into this all the time, where you have interconnecting parking lots. Which is, most communities prefer. Because it takes the traffic off of the main road to go from business to business, so it's normally a preferred way of
It
intercommunication.
exists, we're not opposing it, we're just trying to improve it. And we're trying to improve it in the context of also considering an introduction of new spots and new 180-degree flow and some of the other things that you're suggesting you want to keep in plan.
Well, those people can back up there, it'll be properly signed to left turn only. We've demonstrated that the trucks can make the movement, so obviously a car can make the movement. Now it's just a matter of signing to satisfy the counterclockwise movements. So I think if we could have Stark and, Carlito agree on what the striping is gonna be, we can just add it to the plan.
I think also, John, that's where if you add the parking spaces on the neighboring site, that will help show the channels, because that's really because it's just that void up there right now, void space, that you don't have the indication of where the aisles are.
Right, parking, that's all involved with. Okay, so we can show that, and we will show all of our signage that we're proposing. We can add all that to the application.
Great.
And then the post office, will just pick up what they have, and then there's a little municipal out there that I don't think you can, I don't think you can go from here to here. I think you gotta go this way, right? Municipal lot,
No, you can drive through it.
you can drive there?
Yeah,
Okay. So we'll show the municipal lot and the post office.
great. Thank you. So can we discuss some of the other issues with the, for example, the removal of the green space across the street? I would prefer that if, if you're keeping in those parking spaces alongside the bank, that we do have some green space on the other side of the street, in front of, alongside the road. Especially if you're not including another tenant in this site plan.
Well,
But
I'm happy to do that, and as Carlito suggested, we will land bank them. And if I need them, I need them, and if I don't need them, if someone comes along and it's a permitted use. I have to come back to the board. If I need the parking, okay, we'll talk about it, and rather than land banking it. If my parking needs are adequately serviced, I can go to the ZBA and get a variance and not disturb the land bank area.
now, David, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't with land banking, they have to be paved, or can you actually have landscaped area that is,
Landscaped.
Yeah.
Considered a good
That's
the
the
whole
point of
idea.
land banking, and additionally, that's basically the same concept that we just approved on Water Street. Right?
Yes, he has shrubbery that he's willing to remove in case he needs to put
Yeah,
the
I mean,
spot.
no, he
Right.
got a variance so that we didn't have to
Correct,
land bank
It's
that.
landing back.
but so if it turns out for whatever reason, he needs those spots. I mean, we the ZBA granted a variance from the express terms of the zoning code, into the parking code.
Right,
If it turns out the ZBA was wrong, and he really needs those spots, they're there, they just have vegetation on them, but that's the concept of land banking.
That's not. the way I
that's not
understood it.
what we approved. We didn't approve those two spots along the road to be land bank. Those are,
Oh, no,
In
it's
the
not,
site
it wasn't, it's not formal, it's not a formal land bank, but I'm saying. The concept is that if the spaces are there if you need them, but for the time being, they're in vegetation.
yeah, I mean, I would really just prefer that to be on the site plan as green space and not, this could turn into parking at any time if
Well, the
it,
problem is, again, you're forcing me into a position where I don't have the parking to develop the property. And per code, I'm allowed to have them. I'm agreeing I don't need them, and I'm willing to part with them at this time, but let's say the gym use changes in 10 years from now, and I need more parking for the next 10. But I have 7 spaces, I may need them. So I'm just saying, to the extent that I do not need.
But you would
them
have to
now,
come back here again at that time.
well, as long as they're land bank. If they're land bank, yes, I have to come back and say, hey, I have these 7 spaces. Per code, I need them, but alternatively, I can go to the ZBA. And get a variance, and I cannot disturb them.
My suggestion is that we allow the applicant to make the changes that we discussed regarding the flow of traffic and the striping and signage. And you can bring back the application that you want this board to consider and we can
This is
vote
what I
on that.
want, this is what I'd like them to consider.
Well, you have to bring it back with the changes that we've just discussed you were going to make to account for the idea that there's traffic flow from this additional adjacent lot. And it's not this application, it's this application with the changes we just discussed making.
So the one-way traffic, just so, the one-way traffic, the
Yep.
post office island.
Yep.
The access from the mobile station and whether or not it handicaps, the departments are required to one handicap.
Okay, and should we at this point, like, set a public hearing so the public can, you know, comment on that, the site plan with those changes?
No.
Are you, okay, I feel like.
Well, usually a
that
public
would be-
hearing is set when the plan is complete enough that the public could see exactly what's being proposed. If we feel like these changes are inconsequential, then we could set a public hearing. If we think those changes are significant enough that we want the public to be able to see those changes before they had to attend the hearing, then we should wait for the next
I think
plan.
this is 95% done.
Zach, would you allow me to come up and show you, it was something that Rick and I spoke about that could hopefully solve some of the green space problem?
I showed him that it's not being considered by the applicant, even though it's consistent with the code and a request of the plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Sure.
You
You're not required to refer this to the county planning board, but it probably is recommended given the traffic concerns.
Do you expect to come back soon with this?
Oh, I'll be back next month, for that
So-
application.
why don't we
So I
set the
think-
public hearing for the following one?
Yes, I would like to set the public hearing, and I think if you can update these site plans as soon as possible and get those to us, then when you know, notice your neighbors for everyone who wants to look at the plans, they'll be able to find the updated plans.
So I could have this turned around in a couple days. What's the notification period?
10 days. Do you want to set it for the August 20th meeting, the hearing, rather than the 6th? And that gives
That would be
everybody time.
Now we can come back and talk about what, you know, what the changes
So
are.
come back on the 6th and
And
then
then
have
set
the
the
public
public
hearing
hearing
on
for
the
the 20th.
20th.
I think that's, and well, by then, the DOT will opine on it and won't be much left.
Okay, if that timeline is agreeable with you, then we don't need to set the public hearing right now, that's fine. I do think it would be a good idea to ask the Ulster County Planning Board for their input, however. If
They
we
meet on
can,
August 7th, so if you do want to send it, you will need to do a resolution tonight.
right,
You could-
and
Well, you could.
we would
but
ask
they
that
wouldn't
you-
Do it till September.
yeah, we would ask that you would have your updated site plan ready as soon as possible, so we could send it to them.
Yeah, that's fine. This is a couple hours.
Okay, so could I get a motion to refer this application to the Ulster County Planning Board for recommendations?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I suppose we will see you at the next one.
You'll see me at the next meeting. Thank you very much. Have a nice
Thank
night.
you.
You're absolutely green, we need the green space. But you cannot- I don't understand.
It would be land banked, so if you know, use changes in the future, then he could tear up.
Thank you, Carly, I think we're all set.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Good night. It's not my ideal solution either, yeah. Finally, we have Newport Apartments, PB 21AX.
I just told John Joseph that I'm gonna request that he go after me next time.
I think you earned that privilege.
Yeah. It's hard, you know, 3-card Monty, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
So I think, you know, the reason why we wanted to have this discussion tonight was more specifically about some comments we received from the police department. Did you get a copy of those?
Do
Did
we-
you see those?
I have not seen them, but I don't know, do we have Xena on here?
Yep.
Good.
So let me pull
If
that
we've- if Xena's
email up.
seen them.
There were two separate emails. One was simply the dollar amount of $400 and some approximately per call is what was estimated. And then the second was about the number of calls.
I thought the price per call was from the rescue squad? Yeah.
They were both from the chief, the police chief, I believe. I don't think we heard from the rescue squad,
Okay.
and we did not hear back from the fire.
You didn't hear back from the rescue squad?
We did not.
And so
I could be wrong with it.
Police Chief Matthew Sutton said after reviewing the report, I think this project will have a more significant impact on MPPD. The report cites that SUNY PD responds to 800 calls on campus per year. In speaking with SUNY PD Chief Williams, that number is not accurate. We are halfway through 2024 and SUNY PD already has over 2,000 calls for service. Also, something that isn't factored into the police section of the report is that NPPD responds to all fire and rescue calls as well. To get an accurate figure, we would have to adjust the actual calls SUNY PD handles, which is at least 4 times what is stated. Also take into account all the fire and rescue calls that NPPD is required to respond to. So this, I guess, is, you know, directly relevant to the economic and fiscal impacts section. Guess I mean, I have not identified like a specific section that I would like to change, although there is this, you know, section on page 77 where it states that SUNY New Paltz University Police respond to calls on campus approximately 800 per year based on 3,000 students living on campus. Like I think that number should be updated. Maybe with the 2024 numbers, or maybe with the final end of 2023 numbers. But it
Yeah,
does seem.
Oh, can I step in? This is Tom. Yeah, we got the notes, and I think the numbers were based upon responses to the dormitories, because I would say all calls from the campus are, you know, we're talking about residential living environments, not all other traffic or all other calls that related to something else. We were trying to narrow that down to residential calls for the dorms. So we got the notes. I'm not the expert. It's Camoin Associates who does all the economic and life safety and emergency services analysis for us. We provided them the information. They weren't available to kind of turn around a response or an updated calculation in such a short time frame. So they have the information. They're going to do a follow-up with SUNY New Paltz Police Department, the New Paltz police chief, just to confirm the assumptions, and then we'll sort of update what the calculation would be, as well as what they factor, not we, but they factor as the dollar value cost impact, which will then adjust the overall impact on the economics. So I think we probably need another week for them to get that, and that's if the police department and the campus safety chief are available to update those numbers for us in that short time frame. But I think that they're the ones who needs to handle that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. That makes sense, and I'm glad that they're going to reevaluate those numbers. Will that then be reflected in this appendix, or does that just go into the FEIS?
Should be in both.
Like, it's part of the question.
I guess maybe that's a question for you too, David, the appendices of the DEIS. If there is information in there that is now out of date or, needs to be changed, do those get modified too, or do we just, is all the changes are just in the FEIS?
Can we request, what, Kitty Brown suggested that the appendices be incorporated
Into the FEIS?
yes.
One way or another, if there's incorrect information that needs to be updated in the appendices, it should be corrected. As far as whether they, until you put in the FEIS, we'll get back to you with an opinion on that, but it's straighten out the information that needs to be updated.
Okay.
I mean, look. Offhand, I would say, I'll check with Emily when she gets back and we'll get back to you, but offhand, I would say, if there is information that needs to be replaced in the appendices, particular information that's incorrect, it should be replaced. I mean, you can make a note in the FEIS or whatever, but it's not like when you bring that chapter out and put it in places in the FEIS.
Right.
Now, if there's a comment on it from the public, comments need to be responded to in the FEIS. So Kitty's comment would, I guess, qualify.
So what's going to happen? They're going to take this and redo it and give it back to us to review? They're gonna take back the FEIS?
Well, I mean,
there's so many different changes and there's so many new things that we've all talked about and the public's talked about and our board has talked about. So we're gonna get a new document?
now the question for the board will be whether you want the applicant to continue to amend the document or whether you want to pick it up yourself.
Well, we're giving all this feedback. We've been giving feedback for 4 sessions now, and we've had public comments as well. So aren't they going to incorporate it and redo it?
Are they in the applicant?
Yes.
They will, if you ask them to, sure.
I believe that we did ask them to, and I believe they're working on it after
what we're doing.
we gave.
So you're in the process of doing
Yeah,
that.
and I agree with what Dave's saying. I think it has to be corrected. It's
Well, there's
absolutely-
so many things that came up, even just the parking spaces and the one bed per person or 2 people in it. It's a big issue. Like
Well,
that changes all the different tables.
The affordable housing we've discussed
That's
length.
another part of it.
at night. And I went outside and talked to the Dentons too. I encouraged them to talk to Terry because Terry, I think, has a firm understanding of what the affordable housing is doing and how it's working. And then I offered, after they talked to Terry, to have a meeting or a Zoom with Tom George and his affordable housing people. Because there's fundamental things that, this board understands, Terry understands, but they didn't understand.
I don't
That,
even
that
think it would
we,
be,
that we don't have control over.
I don't think it would be a bad thing at this point for this board and the Affordable Housing Board to have a joint meeting with you guys.
Yeah, we've done it before.
Or
We
you just did it with
can,
Terry.
we can do it
It wouldn't be a
again.
bad thing for us all to be invited there.
It's not a problem. We won't be able to have a quorum, but we could certainly pick 2 people to.
We could have.
No.
We could have a forum if we invite.
We did it at a meeting,
invite their
yes.
board to our board.
Yes, you could
Is
do
what-
it at a
is
meeting.
what I'm recommending.
Let me also answer your question further procedurally. If it gets to the point that the amendments to the DEIS appendices rise to the level where you're concerned that you're essentially significantly amending the DEIS and that, the DEIS is a statutory requirement to hold a public comment period on. If it gets to that point, then I'm not in any way suggesting that we're there, but it's up to the board. You can require a supplemental environmental impact statement.
And then do we have another public hearing on the next DEIS on the final
Yes, that's what I'm
copy?
saying, your 2 choices as you amend this going forward are simply to, edit it within the FEIS process and, have public comment. Or if you thought that something was just really terribly wrong and needed to be formally redone, you can require supplemental DEIS, at which point you go through the process.
I mean, to my knowledge, the only inaccurate information or the only information that is in question, I don't know, I'm not Moline, so I don't know. I can't assess the police calls and the fire and rescue calls. But to my knowledge, that's the only thing in thousands and thousands of pages that has been, significantly different than what our numbers were. I mean, I see the things that we're doing now at the end of the process and tweaking the document, which has been wondrously tossed and examined for now 3 years. So I don't think there's anything that's,
I don't mean to suggest that, I'm saying that
Yeah.
those are your alternatives for amendment. So you typically go along with a less impactful amendment of the FEIS and the appendices, but the other thing is, if you go, you need to go back and dig it out, and doing a supplemental DEIS. And so that's not.
I'm very strongly in favor of us trying to have the applicant complete an FEIS based on what was presented to us and all the comments that have been made against it. And us finalizing and representing that FEIS as a board. And then we will have lots of detailed discussions about nearly every one of the issues. Once that FEIS is published by us. And until that FEIS is published, we can't move to that next place. So I'm really recommending that with everything that's been gathered right now, we have all the changes that I think are appropriate to be made at this time.
Okay.
And then we will go into application review.
I found that, even from the beginning, that, I don't feel like there's any, sort of practical proof of the entire economic analysis. For example, they say there's no vacancies. I actually went and called and found that there were numerous apartments available in New Paltz. It's not about the vacancy, it's about the price. They're saying there's zero vacancy. Well, practically that isn't true. And then some of the other claims that were made, the basic claim being that an increase in the supply of housing is somehow going to result in the provision of affordable housing for people. It just sort of basically isn't true. If that were true, you'd be able to have an affordable housing in New York City. Because what happens is that it's not necessarily true that the landlords are going to do that. It's more likely that they're going to gentrify. They use software so that they can, charge the highest prices possible for the units.
So I have a question.
So yes.
Was this raised when we had the opportunity to raise comments and questions about the document?
Yes, I've been raising it and I sent,
Okay.
I thought I sent links to the planning board to,
Yeah, there's an entire study that considers those questions. I mean, I don't know what else to say, except that the study is there.
Yeah.
I mean, you may disagree with the results,
the
but
reality.
that study is
different from
there.
The study. Look at Kingston. I mean.
I mean, the
I
vacancy
don't-
rate isn't based on something that we
You're
pulled out of
sharing
the
rates
air.
Anecdotal, it's not a
I
study.
understand that. That's why I can't,
And
it's very difficult for me to sort of reconcile this because I see the study, and then
And-
the practical reality is different from what the.
The key
state
is that
study.
this long tail of trickling comments is something we have to conclude. Because we've made comments about every single thing we've been invited to make comments about. And now it's the applicant's responsibility on our behalf to update this FEIS. And then we can go back to those discussions. If your question you're asking is fundamental to consideration of approval of the application, then we'll have to discuss it again.
Well,
But for now, we can't have like continuing trickling comments
Right. Well,
because
so,
there's no stop point to get us to a point where we have an FEIS
right.
that we can represent.
But if I can't, I mean, if I find that the practical reality of the claims is not existent, despite of, whatever study you want to put forward, then I can't, eliminate it.
So
That's
then
what I
that
had
may
to
be
do with
something
the
that you'll choose
management.
to say in the time when we have to revisit that topic.
Okay, because they had, given a glowing report of the management company, and then when I went and researched it, it turned out that they weren't so great. And so I said, well, that's a claim I can't abide by,
So
we're
they're
gonna take it out.
Yeah,
But at the same point, the reality of the situation is we want the property to be well managed. And it's a huge impact on the community, how, to what in what manner the property is managed.
The point I'm making,
So-
which I'm making as firmly as I can possibly make it to this board, is we have to cease making additional comments and allow what we've input thus far and what the public has input thus far to be the basis of the FEIS that we represent, and move this step of the process.
So we'll get it absorbed and then we can comment again if we don't like the way it's.
And it's noted, Rachel, and maybe everyone has several things that should be noted, are still things that they might want more discussion about or even oppose. And we have to have this FEIS finalized by the applicant and represented by this board as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, it would be, if there are specific passages in here that you want changed, that's even better. Let's, you know, we can start accumulating those and taking our own notes. So when that final document comes back, we can make
Go
any
back through it.
changes, final changes that we as a board need in order to feel like it's our document and then approve it.
So,
Am I correct that the ball is right now in the developer's court to provide to us their version
Yeah.
of a final EIS?
Our final, yes.
We all agree.
Yes.
It's their responsibility to give us a document.
Yeah, we have I took copious notes at the last meeting and Zena has all those issues that were raised. I was saying to the Dentons outside that I was talking about, you know, the Biden administration adopted fairly recently restrictions on the length of EISs because they see what's happening. They're trying to do solar projects, they're trying to do wind projects, and there's this endless review. So the Biden administration said EISs shouldn't be any longer than 300 pages tops, you know, not 3,000 pages, which is what we have. It's the situation is out of control. And like I was saying at the last meeting, I don't know if Dave agrees with this, but I've always been a proponent of having a targeted portion of the EIS where you identify the 5 main or 6 main issues, concentrate on them and make a better project. It gets so amorphous. It's just, you know, it's uncontrollable. But anyway, we will work on the answers and get them in, especially, and Rachel, I will emphasize with Tom, the Des Moines people look at the economics, you know, look at the vacancy rate, make sure that, you know, their numbers are correct. I mean, to my knowledge, they've used all the vacancy rates that are published. I mean, they're using published data, you know, so.
I just used my phone and I called.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's, like I said, it's summertime in a college town. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Okay, the other thing is that what's important, I feel also, is there has to be some accountability. That was the other thing I found when I was doing my research, is that there. So can I just ask you a question? You own the property, correct?
Correct.
And are you planning to sell the property or are you planning to
No, I do not have an equity position in this project, no.
what do you mean by-
I didn't take an equity position in the project. I would never do that and be the lawyer for the project.
So you're
If
gonna
this
be-
project goes through, my portion of the land will be sold.
You're talking this to sell
Right.
Yeah.
She just said whether the developer is gonna hold the project to sell it, I think.
Yeah, I mean-
No, I was-
You still make it.
So you're gonna sell.
No,
the
she's talking about
property.
me.
Right, I am. No, he sort
This
of.
isn't a secret.
No, I.
I'll answer
understand.
you totally honestly.
Okay, I mean, we can even do.
If this
another time.
project is
Yeah.
approved,
I'm actually very
if the project is approved, I'm gonna
But-
sell my interest to Tom's outfit. That's what I'm gonna do,
Okay,
which I've said from 3.5 years ago.
no, I just, and then, but then is Tom gonna turn around and sell it?
I have no idea what he's gonna
That's
do.
what-
He's made a representation that he has a management company. They manage some portfolio, they sell other portfolios, but those are not seeker issues. They're not even, it's a site plan issue.
I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, fine, but it's just, there are practical issues that affect the people who live here and the people who will live there.
Bill, would you be able to send a note to the fire department?
I have a
and ask them to
motion
get back
to
to us?
adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Yeah, the fire, we'll check.
Bill Murray's here, he's in the fire department, maybe he can put in a good word for us.
Maybe I've reached out to them and, you know, I gave them the information, so if they
We'll try again too.
We have
we'll try
a second and all in favor of the motion to adjourn? Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Have a good
Yeah.
rest of the week. Trying to stay cool.
Thank you.
No problem. Everything's good. All good. Terry, I'm sorry I volunteered you.
Well, that's all right.
But
No.
I figured it'd be the best way to go forward. And I think.
You know,
we should-
obviously, you know,